a lot of the relationships that we work with, Amy, the neurodiverse relationship, there's a lot of trauma A, a lot of the abandonment, rejection, and all of that. And then there's sometimes trauma B with different forms of abuse that have been. And so there's been these patterns before the couple realizes that they have different neurotypes and they handle emotions differently. For some of our neurodivergent folks, they struggle with alexithymia, which is the ability to name their emotion. And they also struggle with interoception, which is feeling the feeling in their body, being present in their body. So those are two things that are legitimate things happening for the person who's on the spectrum. But why we love the Wilder life model, deeper walk, coursey stuff is because of the neuroplasticity. And it's like, oh, well, you're not just in bondage to your brain type, or you're not in bondage to your family of origin. You're not in bondage to what you learned. You can start to change your brain and you can start to change these patterns. But I think, so let's kind of start with a couple. They're trying to identify, they just kind of found out there to have different neurotypes, and we've been doing all these things. We've got lots of stories in our head about why the other person did the other thing. And we want to try to change this cycle. We're like, we don't want to be fear motivated anymore. We want to be joy or love motivated. How do we just start that process, which feels so big? We got 2 or 3 decades into this. I feel nervous every time you walk in the room. Well, I feel nervous every time you walk in the room. You're going to ask something of me. You're going to want something of me. You're going to react to me. You might ask me a question I don't know. Like, it gets that tender on a daily basis. Where do we start? How do we stop these cycles?
Yeah, so the way that we build a healthy bond is with the rhythms of joy and quiet. So we want to build joy. And one of the things that I would recommend for a couple is to find a group activity that builds joy, so that it's not so much pressure on, okay, we have all of these years of these interactions that go south very quickly. But maybe we can join a group that is doing something that we both want to learn how to do. It doesn't even have to be a group that we already know. So we might take up golfing lessons. We might do painting. We might go to a cooking class together, whatever just has like a little glimmer of that could be fun, but doing it with a group of other people. And so that we have this experience of joy of, oh, yes, the group is glad to be together. We're part of that. And now we're starting to build a little bit of history of joy. Oh, remember when we were with the hiking group and we went up and we had a picnic on the, at the top of the mountain or whatever. So that can displace some of the pressure that, oh, we're building joy with a group of people. And so then that gives us room to start like, oh, let's look back on our memories from this group activity and talk about it. And then recognizing too that we have to be creative if we're neurodiverse. So one of the things that tends to build joy is eye contact. Depending on our level of neurodiversity, eye contact might be uncomfortable. So what would be comfortable instead? So is it comfortable to just reach out and touch the other person on the shoulder or the hand? So what are the things that we can do that are a little bit different? And I really recommend also using you can Google the emotion wheels that include body sensations and behaviors. And so we can start on the outer rim of these emotion wheels and go, okay, this is a behavior that I'm seeing in myself. Okay, let me go back and look at what emotions might be associated with that. And does any of that resonate with me? Because we may have to look at, we may have to kind of toggle back and forth between trying to identify an emotion and what are some behaviors or body sensations that tend to be associated with that. But yeah.
So in that, let's go back to let's take the cooking class, for example. seems reasonable that if we're making that our foundation in the first place and we want to at least create a joy memory, we ought to make this as simple as it possibly can. There ought to be if we've got a history of whatever it is, getting in an argument about whatever, we ought to pick something that we think has the least opportunity for such a thing and be very intentional. I started the idea of introducing the fear bond idea with two people that were intentional about, yes, we want to do this, because I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense if one person is not really into it. I don't know that you use the word fear motivation, and unilaterally that's true, but in a fear bond world, it really does take both of you to handle your own fear motivations, or the bond stays bondage. I think, just to say that again, when we go to cooking class, we're picking something really simple, and we're intentionally staying away from the areas that are historically volatile, and being intentional with our words to be very encouraging. Wow, look at if this is a baking class and you just made cupcakes, for instance, that this is a good design, or you stir well, or I don't know, something.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is very true. So we want to keep looking for what might be satisfying. Knowing what satisfies is a child maturity task that is important. And so experimenting with, okay, well, what would be satisfying about that? So would the cooking class be better, or a hiking thing? Because do we need to do something where we have the option to kind of like move away from the group for a moment if we need it and be back? So, yes, we have to see, like, okay, what is the thing that the person who is least invested in it is willing to do, and then celebrate that, like, wow, we did it. We did this hiking group, and I so appreciate that you were willing to do this group activity, even though you're not crazy about being in groups. And just continue to look for what is it that might be satisfying. And also, you can try things that are a one-time effort, so you don't have to commit to something that is 8 weeks or whatever. But yeah, so how far are we willing, like, am I willing to take this step right now?
And I suppose that, let's take the cooking class. Celebrate a win if nothing bad happens. It doesn't have to be joy fireworks.
Right.
It could be the absence of conflict for 30 minutes.
Yes, yeah. And oh, well, who did you enjoy watching anybody else interact in the cooking class? What did you like? What did you enjoy about, even discussing what did you enjoy and not enjoy so very much? Like, ooh, I didn't want to have to touch those things, that was not fun, but oh, thank you so much for trying it, even though you were not into it. But yeah, celebrating the smallest things that is helpful. So building joy, finding those things that help us build joy is important, and then learning to quiet together. What is a way that helps us quiet? Because we want to build a bond that involves this rhythm of joy and quiet. So we want to look at, okay, does quieting together mean sitting on the couch quietly, or does quieting together actually mean taking a walk together, because I need to move a little bit to allow my body to quiet? What does that look like? What would a really satisfying quieting experience look like for you? Would we sit on the couch and listen to music, or have nothing? Would we sit on the couch and hold hands, not touch, put our arms around each other? There are all these different options. And so it's the exploring the options together and as a way to build joy, but letting yourself know that, oh, it's okay if we need to quiet in a way that was not what we first thought.
Yeah, and I try to tell the couples that this isn't like a linear approach, and my hands are going in a circle on video. You won't see that on the podcast. But if we've been going over here in this direction in a fear bond for a really long time, physics tells us it's going to take some pretty big inertia to stop that direction, right? So intentionality. But when we stop going in this direction, it doesn't mean we turn and face the other direction. So one of my clients came up with this term. I like it. I said, I'm going to start using this, the messy middle. We've identified that we have these fear bonds. We want to stop them. It's not going to be 1 week, one interaction, 1 month to just, now we're enjoying fear bonds. We have history, right? And we have these things that our brain are still triggered by, but we're being intentional, with the verbal logical explainer, as we'll learn about more in a couple of weeks. Like, I've got to keep saying like, this was a neutral experience. This was a non-conflict experience. Like, it didn't bring us joy and connection and all of that, but it does make me feel less afraid or nervous or tense around you. And so that's why a lot of the marriage advice that's out there in a lot of the other books about just like have more dates and have more sex. If you're in a fear bonded situation, just doing more things together is not necessarily going to be helpful. So I love that idea of a group, like for a hike. We can have times we can walk together. We have times we can be in the group. I have times I can walk with a woman. You have times you can walk with a guy. Something like that builds a very low-key shared experience that we can talk about. And it takes some of that pressure off of like being at a meal alone in a restaurant and having to fill that time when we don't have very good skills yet of communicating.
Yes. Yeah. I love that messy middle. That's so good and it will stay messy. So I think that's another thing is that a lot of times because of our culture and movies and books and so forth, we have this idea of what most relationships are like. And even as Christians, church culture does not help us sometimes because everybody comes in with a smile on their face and we have assumptions about what's going on at home. So, they're smiling. And so, everybody, they must be just doing great and they must be having a wonderful time together all the time. So recognizing like, it is absolutely normal that two people who come together with completely different histories, it's going to be messy. And especially since we tend to be drawn to people who kind of trigger the stuff that still needs to be healed, which is God's beautiful way of giving us another opportunity for it to be healed. But it doesn't feel great in the midst of it because we think, we've done something wrong. I love that messy middle and acknowledging that.
One of the things that we all probably do to a certain extent with maybe few exceptions, is hide behind some kind of mask.
Yeah.
And I think that's true of just humanity, not specific to a neurodiverse couple. It also seems reasonable that if there is a fear-based relationship going on, or I have a fear motivation, I'm likely hiding perhaps more in certain areas than others, which means the opposite. If I'm hiding, then I'm not being very authentic. Talk a little bit about authenticity, not necessarily being an on-off switch. I don't wake up tomorrow morning and make a decision to put all of that behind me at one time. Right? My authenticity, my reveal of my reality of who I really am and letting that be exposed through, if you used to just take a mat, pretend you got a solid opaque thing in front of your face, you don't just put it down, right? That is a gradual thing. And if you connect that idea to as a fear bond turns into a love bond relationship, as the motivation switches from I'm afraid of this, I'm hesitant in this area to I enjoy, then I think it seems like there is a natural switch from hiding to authentic, to reveal, from hiding to revealing.
Yes. Yeah. So I love how in Dr. Wilder's book, The Pandora Problem, one of his exercises involves the sharing, here is a physical weakness I have. And so we share a physical weakness, which tends to not feel super vulnerable, like, oh, my arms are not very strong, or I have a bad knee, or a weak back. Okay, notice how that feels. Now, what is, like, what is a weakness in accomplishing things that you might have? And it's like, oh yeah, I'm terrible at softball, and I always run when the ball is coming at me. That's really true. And so okay, so I can share that and notice how that feels. Now, what about an emotional or relational weakness? So we want to start sharing the things and being authentic in the ways that we currently have the capacity, that currently feels safe, with the idea that, oh, okay, at some point, I hope I'm going to be able to share more deeply. But yeah, it is not an all of a sudden thing, because there are protective mechanisms that came into place early in life that taught us, oh, absolutely do not do that. Do not let that mask down. And so we have that sense of conflict within us about, oh, I would like to be authentic. And then we're going to sense this feeling of, oh, that's not a good idea. This is dangerous. This is risky. And so it does make sense to pull that back a little bit at a time, so that we say, so we might want to start sharing every once in a while, like, oh, okay, do you have something that you're willing to share about an area of growth, or a weakness that you have, or something that you've never told me that feels like a little bit more safe to tell me now? And so you're just moving into that, and then being able to say, okay, and debrief. I love debriefs. So how did that feel to share that? Okay, how did I do on responding to your sharing? Did that add to your feeling that it's going to be okay to share more, or what could I have done differently? And then now let's reverse, and I'll share with you. But just recognizing, like, oh yeah, it took a long time to get these things in place. And some of them I'm not even aware of, because they came into place before I even had words. And so, yeah, we're like on this. I know I've thought of it before, like an archaeological dig, that you start out and you're like, oh, okay, here's a little something here. And then we realize that, like, oh, it's a huge something. There's a whole lot more here. So I think about the Chinese farmer that discovered, like, oh, there's something here. And then it ended up that there was this huge terracotta army, thousands of pieces that were buried on his property. And so for us, it's discovering ourselves and sharing ourselves a little bit more. It's like that. We start and we go, oh, look at this. And then over time we realize, oh my goodness, there's a whole lot here.
So let's continue on this. I'm going to the cooking class. What are the ideas that you might want to be doing before you actually get to cooking class, right? What do you practice in between cooking classes, such that this isn't showing up in its game day? And I actually never processed anything last week to make cooking class alone push us forward, instead of just being the same. We just stood there beside each other made our cupcake, and turned around and went home. And we did that for 8 straight weeks. And really the only thing we did was make 8 cupcakes that were mediocre and spent some money. But we didn't use it as well as we could have.
Yeah. So before you even go, it would be like, okay, let's set some expectations that are really reasonable. So what are you hoping will happen here? And recognizing, like with neurodivergency, one person may have something extremely concrete that they want to happen. And saying, okay, what are the things that might help us for that to happen? So, okay. So I want us to have fun together. Oh, okay. Well, as we think about this idea of having fun together and looking at our history, and we're going to kind of like call this a safe zone for right now. We're not going to get any fights about our history. We're just saying, what do we know from our history that we could do that would make this more likely that we have fun? Oh, okay. Well, would you please not make fun of me if I'm messy? Would you, could you just enjoy whatever effort I make? Could we be okay if we don't introduce ourselves to the other couples for a few weeks? And just so setting the expectations, and then this idea of debrief. So what went well for you? What did you think? Was there anything at all that made you glad that you were there? And then have some discussion around that. What would you have liked to have happened that didn't happen? What could we do that would increase the amount of joy? Remembering that joy is just us learning how to be glad to be together. So it doesn't mean that we're, like shooting off fireworks as we come out of cooking class. It just means like, oh yeah, there was that moment that I wanted to lean up against you and kind of, oh yeah, that was funny. And so I think this idea of pre-brief and debrief is good, and kind of declaring those like, okay, we want to try to set these pre-brief and debrief as a safe zone where we're not going to go in for the attack, and we're also going to, okay, we're debriefing, so they might say something about how it went that feels ick to me, but I want to stay with it. So yeah, doing that every week would be super helpful.
Yeah, so I would say to couples, because like when we're doing this in coaching, another book that we really love that's not in the same genre, but it's Thanks for the Feedback. And one of the things it talks about as you're learning to receive feedback is to step back and give yourself the second score, and also step back and give the relationship the second score. So if I'm talking with couples and they start going really into the negative of all the things that didn't go well with the cooking class, I'll say, okay, that's definitely important. We want to get to those. What was different? So a year ago today, if you would have tried this, what do you think was different on how you handled it? What do you think went better than maybe a year ago than today? Just to kind of start that thinking, and then score yourself. So not about the relationship, but when you were starting off talking about what went wrong, did you at any point in time do a breathing or quiet yourself or take a moment or set a boundary? Like, what's a score for you? And then let's get to how would we talk about the things that didn't go so well as we're setting up for the next time. So give yourself the second score, me, myself, the relationship, because I think, like Dan was saying back at the beginning, it's not just about if things go well, if something went neutral, if there wasn't conflict, if this thing that always brings up conflict, it made us both pause and we both took a breath and we decided we weren't going to go into conflict. That is really big, because if we start doing that enough, just catching ourselves and not going into the cycle is a way in that messy middle that is growth. And so sometimes when it's not joy fireworks but I still don't feel emotionally and intimately connected, and it's like, Well, we might not for a while because we've got to work on authenticity. We've got to make it safe. We've got to build capacity. We've got to build quieting. We've got to build group joy before we're more over into the fear and love, the love and joy bonds instead of that fear motivated bonds, because no one's perfect. So let's say we've been doing great for 6 months and somebody gets triggered and it triggers my brain into that other thing. It's not like, oh no, all 6 months are lost. It's like, whoa, we were doing so well for 6 months. So what was it that we learned from that we're not going to go back in that pattern? So like having a coach, a counselor, a pastor who knows all this stuff about joy and quieting, who could be that person to maybe with a couple process through some of that is part of it too. If they're not quite ready to do it together, take it to your coach, counselor, or pastor that's a safe person who will guide you versus amplifying, all the things that went wrong, I think.
Yeah, that's so good. There's also the place for what we call do-over stories. So instead of focusing so much on what went wrong, if we can think about for a moment, like, oh, I have a do-over story. So when you couldn't get this to work, I laughed, and I really think I laughed at you. So what I would like to have done, I really would love to have been with you in that and said, oh, let me help you, or not drawn attention to it. This is what I would have liked to have been. This is the kind of spouse I would like to be, or the kind of friend I would like to be. So a do-over story is so powerful because it gives you a different picture in the part of your brain that stores what is it like me to do. And so if I just focus on, here's what went wrong, and just a generic, oh, I hope that, we don't want that to happen again. But if we think of what is my do-over, and we tell that story, and we're focused on that, if we need to say, listen, I am really sorry that I made fun of you, and I sincerely mean that. So the do-over story is not to push under the rug what we did, but just to give both of us a new image of, this is what I would like to have done. And so that can be a powerful part of the debrief as well.
So if anybody's looking, while we were talking about the pre and the post, it reminded me of the material in EHR related to expectation setting, and then a slight CTR on the post side of it, of this is what it was like. This is right. It added specific language to what you're actually after, so you can introduce the topic without having to invent words.
Yeah. For our couples, it's really important. So he said EHR, emotionally healthy relationships. It's really important sometimes for our neurodiverse couples to have scripts. When we're going to do a repair or a do-over story or a ladder of integrity or a setting expectation, sometimes having scripts that bring predictability, a turn taking, and, coming to that regulated, of course, can be super helpful. So we combine a lot of LifeModel Deeper Walk, Thrive, Alive and Well, and the Glazer material, because we need those scripts sometimes to keep us from going off, because we could get triggered. Now I want to tell you, I want to talk about our history informs us, but I don't want to be like, and here's the 12 things you did 10 years ago. All right, I'm amped up. I'm amping you up. You're going to get defensive because you're going to want to fact check something I said. Yes, we need to take history into perspective, but let's do it with some scripts, some post brief, where I say, the intentional planning, and then the debrief. So I want to make sure we have time to talk about your groups, Amy. So as we're kind of closing our time together, which has been so helpful, really kind of breaking things down into practical steps. And I want to say, listeners, Amy's classes have nothing to do with neurodivergence. So we're not trying to say this is a specialty neurodivergence class. Just if you hear the things, you keep hearing all these books we talk about, and you want a place to practice in a safe place, this isn't something like do as a couple kind of thing, but talk about, because I think you mentioned you have 2 or 3 different classes. What would some of the things be that I was like, ooh, I'm on your webpage, Amy, and I'm not sure which one I want to do. Could you just tell us what I might be learning in those classes?
Yes, so there are 3 courses that are called Transformed by Joy is the overall title. The first one is Motivated by Joy, which is about shifting from fear bonds to joy bonds. That will be offered next year. If I had a lot of people that signed up and said, yeah, I'm really interested in doing that, we could look at running it again. So there's Motivated by Joy. The one that is currently running is called Joy in Challenges. And I love what you're saying about scripts, because we give a lot of scripts for this is how to ask for attunement. This is how to give attunement. This is what we do when we're talking about repair and ruptures. And even in one lesson, I have kind of a playbook for walking through repairing after a rupture. And then the last one, it is called Joyful Community. So it is looking at what is it like us to do to create a joyful community. And it uses some materials from Dr. Wilder's book, The Pandora Problem, and from a little bit from Building Bounce by Dr. Warner and others. So those are the 3. Also, if you go to lifemodelworks.org and look under their seminars, there's a seminar that I did with Dr. Wilder that is about healing fear bonds. And so that's kind of a shorter something that you can jump into that's a couple of hours. And then you can join the waiting list for my courses. And then we have journey groups, which are an ongoing thing that help introduce all of these practices as well as some of the concepts. So, yeah.
And they're co-ed, because I thought that was very helpful. Sometimes being in triads with a woman and a man. And, again, because I'm so much in the neurodiverse world, being around having neurotypical men, and there was a neurodivergent man in our group. He identified as such, as neurodivergent. So I think having the different neurotypes and men and women, who are just there to practice. It's not marriage. It's not about your family of origin. It's just about how do I create my identity? What are the things I want to work on, outside of my marriage, outside of my other relationships, finding who I want to be and how I want to react. Like, I can't return to joy or act like myself if I don't know who myself is and how I want to act. I got to know how I want to show up, and then practice showing up that way. And sometimes that's easier, and like with strangers that you're getting to know, and practice on, right? So I enjoyed my time very much. I hated I didn't get to do the next group with you, but I'll be watching myself to see when your groups, because I enjoyed practicing so much. So thank you, Amy, for being on this show and being a part of this special month that we're talking about these things. So you want to take us out and end our podcast today?
So you're not alone on your journey.
And there's hope for your future.